You finally have time. The house is quiet. Your phone is on silent. You sit down to focus and nothing happens. Not because you're distracted, not because something interrupted you. You just can't seem to start. And the strangest part is that you feel more stuck now than you did when you were busy. This isn't about laziness. It's not even about motivation. What you're experiencing is something most people never get explained, and it has almost nothing to do with effort. We're taught that focus is a matter of conditions. Find a quiet space, remove distractions, set aside time, and your brain will do the rest. That's the assumption. But it leaves out something critical. Your brain doesn't treat silence and time as opportunities. It treats them as ambiguity. When you're busy, your brain is reacting. Someone sends you a message, you respond. A meeting starts, you join. There's a deadline, you move toward it. The structure is external, and your attention follows it without much internal negotiation. But when you create open time and space, that external structure disappears. Now your brain has to generate its own direction. And that process, the one we barely notice, uses a completely different system. Research into executive function shows that self-directed focus requires more cognitive resources than reactive focus. Your brain has to decide what to pay attention to, why it matters, how long to stay with it, and whether it's working. Every one of those is a decision, and decisions drain energy even when they feel small. This is why you can answer emails for an hour without much effort, but sitting down to think through a single idea feels impossible. One is structured by someone else. The other requires you to build the structure yourself. And it gets harder the more open the task is. If your goal is vague, like work on that project, or figure out what to do next, your brain doesn't know where to direct itself. It scans for clarity, doesn't find it, and stalls. You might interpret that stalling as resistance. You might think you're avoiding the task, but often, you're not avoiding anything. Your brain just doesn't have enough information to begin. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. The feeling of being unable to focus isn't usually a sign that something's wrong with you. It's a sign that the task, as it exists in your mind, isn't clear enough to act on. You're not failing to focus. You're trying to focus on something that hasn't been defined yet. Think about what happens when you finally do start. It's almost never because you suddenly found willpower. It's because something shifted. You remembered a specific detail. Someone asked you a question. You saw something that reminded you why it mattered. That small piece of clarity gave your brain a direction, and the rest followed. The problem is that we rarely notice this. We just remember that we struggled, and then we didn't. So we assume the struggle was internal, that we weren't trying hard enough, or that we're bad at focus. But focus isn't a personality trait. It's a response to clarity. When the task is clear, specific, and tied to something concrete, your brain knows where to go. When it's vague, distant, or abstract, your brain has nothing to anchor to, and no amount of silence or time will fix that. This also explains why focus can feel easier in slightly chaotic environments. A cafe with low noise, an office with people nearby, even music in the background. These aren't just distractions you've learned to tolerate. They're environmental cues that reduce the demand for self-direction. Your brain doesn't have to create all the structure. Some of it already exists around you. That lowers the cognitive load just enough to let you start. It's not that you focus better with distractions. It's that you focus better when your brain isn't responsible for generating every piece of the framework. And here's something else that happens in silence. Your mind starts to wander not because you're undisciplined, but because that's what minds do when they're not occupied. Studies on default mode network activity show that the brain naturally shifts into a wandering state when it's not engaged with something specific. In a busy environment, your brain has just enough stimulation to stay anchored. In complete silence, it drifts. And every time it drifts, you have to pull it back. That pulling back is effort. It's invisible effort, but it's real. So you sit there in your perfect quiet room, and you're working harder than you realize just to stay present. Meanwhile, the person working in a cafe isn't fighting that same battle. Their environment is doing some of that work for them. This doesn't mean silence is bad. It means silence isn't neutral. It creates its own demand. Now here's the part that might feel strange. If focus depends on clarity, and clarity is hard to generate on your own, then the times you can't focus aren't moments of failure. They're feedback. Your brain is telling you that something about the situation is unresolved. Maybe the task is too broad. Maybe the goal isn't connected to anything real. Maybe you're trying to care about something that doesn't actually matter to you yet, and instead of sitting there forcing it, the more useful question might be, what's missing? This doesn't mean you're overthinking. It means your brain is trying to find something solid to work with, and it hasn't found it yet. That's not the same as procrastination. Procrastination is avoidance. This is search. There's also another layer to this. Sometimes the reason you can't focus is because you're already tired from earlier focus. Your brain has what researchers call a limited capacity for directed attention. You can use it up throughout the day in ways you don't notice. Every time you made a small choice, resisted an impulse, stayed on task when you didn't feel like it, you used some of that capacity. By the time you sit down in your quiet room, you might already be running on fumes. But because you haven't done anything that looks like work, you assume you should still have energy. You judge yourself for feeling drained when you think you shouldn't be. That judgment makes it worse. You're not imagining the fatigue. You're just not accounting for all the invisible effort that came before. And there's one more thing. Focus requires a sense of relevance. Your brain needs to believe, on some level, that what you're doing matters. Not in a grand philosophical way, just in a practical, immediate way. If you're trying to focus on something that feels disconnected from anything real, your brain won't cooperate. It'll keep pulling you toward things that feel more relevant, even if those things are small or trivial. This is why you can lose hours scrolling through your phone but can't spend 10 minutes on the task you planned. It's not that the phone is more important, it's that it feels more immediately relevant in that moment. Your brain isn't broken. It's doing exactly what it's designed to do. It's prioritizing what feels connected to right now. Of course, this doesn't apply to every situation. Sometimes you do need to push through. Sometimes the task is clear and you're just tired, or anxious, or genuinely distracted. This isn't a universal explanation, but it does explain why the advice to just sit down and focus so rarely works. Because sitting down was never the issue. The issue is that your brain doesn't yet know what it's supposed to be doing. And when that's the case, time and silence won't help. They'll just make the uncertainty louder. You're not broken. You're not undisciplined. You're trying to operate a system that needs something you haven't given it yet. And once you see that, the question stops being, why can't I focus? And starts being, what does this actually need to be? That shift won't solve everything, but it might stop you from blaming yourself for something that was never about effort in the first place. Because the truth is, focus isn't something you force. It's something that happens when the conditions inside your mind align. And sometimes, those conditions take longer to build than we expect. You can have all the time in the world. You can have perfect silence. But if the task isn't clear, if your brain is already fatigued, if the relevance isn't there, focus won't come. And that's not failure. That's just how attention works.